Why would the richest cowboy in Wyoming claim a stranger as his wife in front of an entire town? The room fell silent as Wade Mercer wrapped his hand around hers. A champagne glass slipped from someone's fingers and shattered across the hotel floor. Delilah could still feel the sting of humiliation burning in her cheeks when the cowboy stepped between her and the crowd. Then he looked straight ahead and said 4 words no one expected to hear. The silence that followed felt even louder. What do you think Wade was hiding? Let me know in the comments. The wind came down from the Wyoming hills, carrying the smell of snow. Delilah Brooks pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders as she stepped off the wooden sidewalk and crossed toward the Elk River Grand Hotel. A large white box rested carefully in her arms. Inside were 12 pecan pies she had spent most of the night baking. The hotel glowed with lantern light. Music drifted through the windows. Laughter followed. It was the kind of place where wealthy ranch owners gathered to talk business over crystal glasses and expensive cigars. People like Delilah usually entered through the kitchen, not the front door. But Mrs. Avery, the hotel manager, had specifically asked for the pies to be delivered to the ballroom before 7. So Delilah pushed through the front entrance. The room fell quieter than she expected. Not silent, just enough to feel it. Men in tailored coats turned their heads. Women wearing satin dresses glanced her way before returning to their conversations. Delilah kept walking. She had learned years ago that dignity often meant continuing forward even when every instinct told you to leave. The ballroom sparkled beneath 2 enormous chandeliers. At the center stood Eleanor Whitmore. The daughter of banker Silas Whitmore looked as polished as a magazine illustration. Her emerald green gown caught every light in the room. When she noticed Delilah, her smile faded. "Can I help you?" she asked. Delilah adjusted the pie box. "Delivery for the banquet." Eleanor's eyes moved slowly over Delilah's plain brown dress. "Through the front door?" A few nearby guests chuckled. Heat climbed into Delilah's cheeks. "I was told to bring these directly inside." "Well," Eleanor replied, lifting her champagne glass, "someone should have told you this isn't a bakery." More laughter. A man near the fireplace smirked into his drink. Delilah set the box down on a serving table. "I'll be leaving now." "That's probably best." The words were soft, almost sweet, which somehow made them worse. Delilah nodded once, then turned toward the exit. The ballroom doors opened before she reached them. Cold air swept inside. Conversation stopped. Every head turned. Wade Mercer had arrived. Even Delilah knew who he was. Everyone in Elk River did. Owner of Mercer Creek Ranch, 40 years old, rich, respected, and known for keeping everyone at arm's length. He removed his black hat and handed it to a waiting attendant. Then his dark eyes moved across the room. Straight to Delilah. She felt her stomach tighten. He started walking. Not toward the bankers, not toward Silas Whitmore, not toward Eleanor. Toward her. The room seemed to hold its breath. Wade stopped only a few feet away. For a long moment he simply looked at her. Then his gaze shifted to Eleanor. "What happened here?" Nobody answered. Eleanor recovered first. "Nothing important. Just a delivery girl who came through the wrong door." The silence that followed felt sharp enough to cut. Wade looked back at Delilah. His expression never changed, but something hardened in his eyes. Then, to the shock of everyone in the ballroom, he reached for her hand. His grip was steady, warm despite the cold outside. Delilah froze. So did the room. Wade lifted his chin slightly and spoke in a calm voice that carried to every corner of the ballroom. "There's been a misunderstanding." Eleanor blinked. Silas Whitmore slowly lowered his drink. Wade tightened his hand around Delilah's. "This woman isn't a guest." The room leaned forward. He looked directly at Delilah, then at everyone else. "She's my wife." The ballroom exploded into whispers. Delilah forgot how to breathe, because she had never seen Wade Mercer before in her life, and yet his hand never left hers, as if he had no intention of letting go. The whispers spread across the ballroom like wind through dry grass. Delilah could barely hear them over the pounding of her own heart. Silas Whitmore stared at Wade Mercer as though he had suddenly started speaking another language. Eleanor's face had gone pale. "Your wife?" she finally said. The words sounded brittle. Wade didn't look at her. "That's what I said." The silence stretched. Then someone laughed nervously. Another guest cleared his throat. A waiter nearly dropped a tray of champagne glasses. Delilah opened her mouth. Nothing came out. She had spent 27 years learning how to remain composed when life turned strange. This was beyond strange. This was impossible. Wade finally turned toward her. His expression remained calm. "Would you walk with me, Mrs. Mercer?" The name hit her like cold water. Mrs. Mercer. She almost corrected him. Instead, she found herself nodding, because every eye in the room was watching. Because she needed answers. Because somehow his steady voice made it seem like there might actually be a reason behind this madness. Wade guided her through the crowd. No one stopped them. No one dared. The cold Wyoming air struck her face as they stepped outside. The hotel doors closed behind them. The music vanished. Only the wind remained. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Delilah pulled her hand free. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" Wade looked out toward Main Street. Lanterns glowed along the boardwalk. A wagon rattled across the frozen road. Finally, he answered, "Trying to save my ranch." Delilah blinked. "I don't even know you." "No. You just told 200 people we're married." "I know." "Then perhaps you should explain." A faint cloud of breath drifted from his mouth. "My carriage is waiting. I'm not getting into a carriage with a stranger." "Fair enough." He nodded once. "Then let's talk in the hotel office." The manager quickly surrendered the room. 10 minutes later, they sat across from one another at a scarred oak desk. A kerosene lamp burned between them. Outside, snowflakes had begun drifting from the dark sky. Wade removed his gloves. His hands looked like a working rancher's hands. Not a banker's. Not a politician's. The hands of someone who still fixed fences and saddled horses himself. "My father made mistakes before he died," he said. Delilah folded her arms. "I'm listening." "He signed agreements with Silas Whitmore." "The banker?" "Yes." Wade stared at the lamp flame. "If I remain unmarried by spring, Silas gains control of water rights attached to Mercer Creek." The significance landed immediately. Everyone in Elk River understood water. Without water, cattle died. Grass vanished. Ranches collapsed. "You could marry Eleanor." His jaw tightened slightly. "No." The answer came too quickly, too firmly. Delilah noticed. Wade continued. "My father expected it. Silas expected it. Half the county expected it. But you don't." "No." The room fell quiet again. Then Wade opened a leather folder. Inside were documents, contracts, official seals, signatures, numbers, pages and pages of them. He slid them across the desk. "I need a wife." Delilah stared at him. "You need a wife? For 1 year?" The absurdity of it nearly made her laugh. Instead, she shook her head. "No." Wade seemed unsurprised. "I'll pay every medical bill your grandmother has." The room went still. Delilah's eyes narrowed. "How do you know about Ruth?" "I asked questions before I walked into that ballroom." A flicker of irritation crossed her face. My grandmother isn't a bargaining chip. No. His voice softened. She's family. That's why I mentioned her. He slid another paper forward. A foreclosure notice. Delilah immediately recognized it. The notice hanging on a nail inside her kitchen. The one threatening to take her house within 60 days. Her stomach tightened. Wade watched her carefully. I'll pay that debt too. She looked away, toward the frosted window, toward the dark street beyond, toward a life that suddenly seemed split into two paths. One led back to the little house she shared with Ruth. Bills, worry, long nights. The other led somewhere unknown, dangerous, complicated, yet impossible to ignore. 1 year, Wade said quietly. You save your ranch, and your grandmother gets proper care. And then? You leave if you want. Delilah studied him. For the first time, she noticed how tired he looked. Not weak, just tired. Like a man carrying something heavy for too long. The clock on the wall ticked. Snow tapped softly against the glass. Neither spoke. At last, Delilah stood. I need to think. Wade rose as well. That's fair. He handed her the foreclosure notice. Take it. She accepted it slowly. I haven't agreed. I know. For the first time, something almost resembling a smile touched the corner of his mouth. But I think you will. The next morning, Delilah sat beside the old cast-iron stove in her kitchen. A coffee cup cooled untouched in her hands. Ruth Brooks slept in the next room. The foreclosure notice lay on the table. Beside it rested Wade Mercer's proposal. Outside, snow-covered Elk River. The town looked quiet, almost peaceful. But Delilah knew better. Sometimes the hardest decisions arrived on the calmest mornings, and by the time the church bell rang 8 times across town, she had made hers. She folded the papers carefully, pulled on her coat, and stepped into the snow, heading toward Mercer Creek Ranch, toward the man who had called her his wife, and toward a future she could not yet imagine. Mercer Creek Ranch stood several miles outside Elk River, tucked between rolling pasture land and a line of cottonwoods that followed the river. The front gate creaked as Delilah stepped through it. Snow rested on the fence posts. Beyond them, cattle moved slowly across the white fields. A rider approached from the barn. Caleb Turner, the ranch foreman. He studied her for a moment before tipping his hat. Mr. Mercer said you'd be coming. That was all. No questions. No judgment. Just a simple statement. It felt strangely kind. By noon, Delilah found herself standing in the main house with a carpet beneath her boots that probably cost more than everything she owned. Martha Jenkins greeted her at the door. The older woman wore a dark gray dress and wire-rimmed spectacles. She looked Delilah up and down, then nodded once. Good. You've got sensible shoes. That's already an improvement over most women who come through this house. For the first time all day, Delilah smiled. The room Martha showed her overlooked the eastern pasture. A brass bed sat against one wall. A quilt rested neatly across it. On the dresser stood a small vase holding dried wildflowers. Someone had taken time preparing the room. That detail stayed with her. Wade was nowhere to be seen until dinner. The dining room felt too large for 2 people. A storm lantern flickered on the table. Outside, wind rattled the windows. Wade entered carrying a stack of papers. He looked tired. More tired than he had in town. Your grandmother received a visit from Dr. Parker this afternoon, he said while taking his seat. Delilah looked up sharply. You already arranged it? You said yes this morning. The answer was simple, matter of fact, yet something inside her eased. A little. Coffee steamed between them. Neither spoke for a minute. Finally, Delilah broke the silence. You do realize half the county thinks we're married now. I know. And the other half thinks we're crazy. That earned the faintest twitch at the corner of his mouth. Probably. The smile vanished as quickly as it appeared. Still, she had seen it. Over the following weeks, winter settled across Elk River Valley. Delilah learned the rhythm of the ranch. The kitchen ledger had been a mess. She organized it. The supply records were worse. She fixed those too. Soon ranch wives began stopping by the house with requests. A widow needed help calculating feed expenses. A ranch hand's wife needed someone to read a complicated bill from Cheyenne. Delilah helped whenever she could. People noticed, including Wade. One morning she found him studying a receipt she had reorganized. "What?" she asked. He folded the paper carefully. "You saved me $87. 87? Turns out I've been paying twice for lamp oil deliveries." Delilah laughed. The sound echoed through the breakfast room. For a second, Wade simply watched her. Then he looked away. That happened more often after that. Small moments. Longer breakfasts. Extra conversations. Silences that somehow felt comfortable instead of awkward. One evening, she found him repairing a broken saddle strap in the barn. Snow drifted beyond the open doors. A lantern hung overhead. "You could hire someone to do that," she said. "I could." "Then why don't you?" Wade threaded the leather through a brass buckle. "My father hired people for everything. And I spent half my life watching him forget how things actually worked." Delilah nodded. She understood that, more than he knew. By February, the ranch felt less like a place she was staying and more like a place she belonged. That frightened her, because belonging was dangerous, especially when it came with an expiration date. Then came the blizzard. It rolled down from the mountains without warning. By afternoon, the sky had disappeared behind thick gray clouds. Wade and Delilah were checking a distant cattle shelter when the storm hit. Snow swallowed the road. Wind howled across the hills. Visibility vanished. They barely reached an old line shack before dark. The cabin was little more than 4 walls, a stove, and 2 chairs. Wade lit a lantern. Golden light filled the room. Outside, the storm screamed against the walls. Inside, everything became quiet. For a long time, neither spoke. Then Delilah noticed an old photograph sticking out of Wade's pocketbook. A woman. Gentle eyes. Dark hair. "Your mother?" Wade looked down. "Yes." His voice softened. "She died when I was 15. The admission seemed to surprise even him. Hours passed. Stories followed. Losses, regrets, memories. Things neither had planned to share. The distance between them slowly disappeared. At some point, their shoulders nearly touched beside the stove. Neither moved away. The lantern crackled softly. Snow beat against the windows. Wade looked at her. Delilah looked back. The moment stretched. Neither spoke. Neither breathed much. Then the wind slammed against the cabin. The spell broke. Both looked away. And somewhere deep inside, Delilah realized something she had spent weeks trying not to see. She was falling in love with Wade Mercer, the one man she was supposed to leave behind when the year was over. The realization followed Delilah back to Mercer Creek Ranch like a shadow. It sat beside her during breakfast. It rode beside her when she crossed the pasture. It lingered whenever Wade looked at her a second longer than necessary. For several weeks, she tried not to think about it. Spring was still months away. The contract still had time left. And yet every day seemed to move faster. The snow began melting along the banks of the Elk River. Icicles disappeared from the ranch house roof. The ranch hands spoke about spring calves and fence repairs. Life was moving forward. Delilah wished her heart would slow down. One afternoon, Martha asked her to help sort old documents stored in a dusty room above Wade's office. The shelves were packed with ledgers, property records, receipts from cattle auctions, tax notices, documents dating back 20 years. Dust floated through narrow beams of sunlight. Delilah spent hours organizing papers into neat stacks. Near sunset, she discovered a leather-bound ledger hidden behind several older account books. At first, it seemed ordinary. Then she noticed numbers that did not match the ranch's public records. She turned another page, and another. Her stomach tightened. Loan payments, emergency borrowing, missed installments, mortgage extensions, property liens. Mercer Creek Ranch was drowning in debt. The figures stretched back years, far beyond the recent winter, far beyond the contract, far beyond Silas Whitmore's marriage arrangement. Delilah sat motionless. The room suddenly felt colder. She continued reading. Then she found correspondence between Wade's father and Silas Whitmore. Letters, legal agreements, water rights negotiations, financial obligations. One sentence caught her eye. If the marriage condition failed, Whitmore would gain significant leverage over the ranch's river access and outstanding debts. Delilah closed the ledger slowly. For several minutes, she simply stared at the window. The valley below looked peaceful. The reality hidden beneath it was anything but. That evening, Wade returned from inspecting cattle near the South Ridge. Mud stained his boots. His coat carried the smell of cold wind and horses. He immediately noticed the ledger sitting on the table. His expression changed. Not dramatically, just enough. A small shift. A quiet recognition. "You found it." Delilah folded her hands. "How long were you planning to keep this from me?" Wade removed his gloves. His silence answered before his words did. Finally, he sat down. "I wasn't." The answer sounded weak. They both knew it. Delilah looked toward the fireplace. The flames crackled softly. "You told me you needed a wife because of your father's agreement." "That's true. But not the whole truth." "No." The room became painfully quiet. Outside, wind brushed against the windows. A grandfather clock ticked in the hallway. Each second seemed louder than the last. "How bad is it?" she asked. Wade looked at the ledger. "Bad enough." Delilah waited. Eventually, he continued. 3 years of drought hurt everyone." His voice remained steady. "Cattle prices dropped. Repairs piled up. My father borrowed money trying to hold everything together. And after he died, I inherited all of it." The words landed heavily between them. For a moment, Delilah almost felt sorry for him. Then another realization arrived. A harder one. "You didn't just need a wife." Wade said nothing. "You needed someone respectable enough to make the agreement legal." Still silence. The truth sat there between them. Unavoidable. Delilah slowly stood. "So, from the beginning..." His jaw tightened. "Delilah, from the beginning I was your solution." The words hurt more spoken aloud. Wade looked down briefly. Only briefly. But she saw it. The guilt. The regret. And then came the answer she feared most. "At first," he said quietly. "Yes." The room seemed to empty of air. At first. Not now. Not anymore. But the damage was done. Delilah turned away before he could see the tears gathering in her eyes. For days afterward, the house changed. Breakfast became silent. Dinner ended quickly. The easy conversations disappeared. The laughter vanished completely. Martha noticed. So did Caleb. Nobody commented. The ranch itself seemed to feel the distance. Then came the next blow. Silas Whitmore made his move. News spread through Elk River faster than a prairie fire. The banker was publicly challenging the marriage, claiming it had been arranged under false pretenses, claiming the union existed only to manipulate legal agreements tied to the water rights, claiming Mercer Creek Ranch had committed fraud. By the end of the week, notices appeared throughout town. A public hearing would be held. Everyone would attend. Ranchers, merchants, bankers, town officials, the largest gathering Elk River had seen all year. And at that hearing, Wade and Delilah would be forced to defend everything. Their marriage, their future, their place in the valley. Late that night, Delilah stood alone on the ranch porch. The snow was almost gone now. Only scattered patches remained beneath the cottonwoods. Behind her, the front door opened. She didn't turn around. She already knew who it was. Wade stopped several feet away. Neither spoke. The distance between them felt wider than the entire valley. Finally, he said quietly, "I never meant to hurt you." Delilah stared into the darkness. The river reflected a thin strip of moonlight. After a long silence, she answered, "That doesn't change what happened." Wade had no reply. The porch fell silent again, and somewhere beyond the sleeping ranch, the future they had built together was beginning to crack apart. In just a few days, the entire town would decide whether their marriage was real, or whether it had all been a lie. The morning of the hearing arrived gray and cold. A layer of mist drifted above the Elk River. Wagons rolled steadily towards a town. Riders came from neighboring ranches. Store owners closed early. Even farmers from miles away wanted to witness what everyone was calling the trial of the year. By 10 o'clock, the town hall was nearly full. Wooden benches stretched from wall to wall. Boots scraped against floorboards. Coffee steamed from tin cups. Low conversations echoed beneath the high ceiling. At the front stood Silas Whitmore, confident, perfectly dressed, certain of victory. Eleanor sat beside him wearing a dark blue dress and gloves. Her chin remained high. Her eyes never left the doorway. Then Wade entered. A quiet ripple moved through the crowd. He wore a black coat and a clean white shirt. No ranch dust. No work gloves. For once, he looked less like a cowboy and more like a man preparing for judgment. Delilah walked beside him. Simple brown dress, hair pinned neatly. No jewelry except the wedding band she had worn every day since arriving at Mercer Creek. People watched them closely, trying to measure the distance between them, trying to decide if they truly belonged together. Silas wasted no time. He stood and addressed the room. His voice carried easily. He spoke of contracts, deception, legal manipulation. He painted the marriage as a business arrangement created solely to protect water rights. Several people nodded. Others exchanged uncertain looks. Then Silas turned toward Wade. "If this marriage is genuine, prove it." Silence swept across the hall. Wade stood. For a moment he looked toward Delilah. His expression softened, only slightly, but she saw it. Then he faced the crowd. "I won't deny how it started." Murmurs spread instantly. Silas smiled. Wade continued. "I asked Delilah to marry me because I was desperate." The room became quieter, every eye fixed on him. "I believed I could save the ranch." He paused. "I believed I could solve a problem." Delilah stared at the floor. The truth hurt, even now. But somewhere along the way, Wade said, the ranch stopped being the reason. A few heads lifted. Even Silas frowned. Wade looked directly at Delilah. "I should have told her everything sooner." His voice lowered. "I should have trusted her sooner." The room disappeared around her. For the first time in days, he wasn't speaking to the town. He was speaking only to her. I was wrong. The words settled heavily between them. Then Silas interrupted. Fine words don't change facts. The spell broke. He stepped forward. This marriage was built on a lie. Several supporters nodded. One of them stood. Then another. The tension inside the hall tightened like a rope. Delilah suddenly realized something. If she remained silent, Silas would control the story forever. Not because he was right, because fear was louder than truth. Slowly, she stood. Every conversation stopped. Even Wade looked surprised. Delilah took a step forward, then another. Her heart pounded so hard she could hear it. The entire hall seemed to disappear. There was only Wade, the man who had hurt her, protected her, frustrated her, waited for her, the man she loved. She stopped in front of him. For one long second, neither moved. Then Delilah reached for his coat, pulled him closer, and kissed him. The room exploded with gasps. A chair scraped loudly against the floor. Someone dropped a coffee cup, but Delilah barely heard any of it. The kiss lasted only a moment, yet it changed everything. When she stepped back, tears glistened in her eyes, not from sadness, from certainty. She looked at the crowd. This marriage may have started with an agreement. Her voice trembled slightly. But that's not why I'm standing here. No one interrupted. No one moved. I stayed because I wanted to. She looked toward Wade. And because I love him. The silence that followed felt endless. Then Martha Jenkins rose from her seat. The elderly housekeeper carried a bundle of documents. I believe these belong in today's discussion. She handed them to the town officials. Old letters, financial records. Evidence showing that Silas had manipulated agreements for years while attempting to gain control of the river access. The room shifted immediately. Questions followed. Then more questions. Several ranchers stood. Families Delilah had quietly helped during the winter offered testimony. Cowboys from Mercer Creek spoke up. Even merchants from town added details Silas never expected anyone to remember. Piece by piece, his carefully built case collapsed. By late afternoon, the decision was made. Mercer Creek Ranch would retain its water rights. Silas Whitmore's claims were rejected. The hall erupted with conversation. Silas left without another word. Eleanor followed shortly afterward. Neither looked back. The crowd slowly dispersed into the fading afternoon light. For the first time in weeks, Wade and Delilah stood alone. The wind carried the smell of thawing earth. Spring was finally arriving. Back at Mercer Creek Ranch, Wade entered the house and walked directly to the fireplace. From a drawer, he removed the marriage contract, the same document that had changed both their lives. Delilah watched quietly. Without hesitation, Wade dropped it into the flames. The paper curled, darkened, then vanished. Neither spoke. The fire crackled softly. Finally, Wade turned toward her, then did something nobody in Wyoming had ever seen him do. The toughest rancher in Elk River dropped to one knee. Delilah's hand flew to her mouth. Wade looked up at her. Not as a businessman, not as a ranch owner, not as a man trying to solve a problem, just as a man in love. I asked you once because I needed help. His voice was steady. I'm asking now because I need you. The room became perfectly still. No contracts. The fire popped softly. No deadlines. His eyes never left hers. No conditions. A faint smile appeared. Delilah Brooks, will you be my wife? Tears rolled freely down her cheeks. This time she didn't hide them. This time she didn't need to. She nodded, then laughed through her tears. Yes. Wade stood, wrapped his arms around her, and for the first time, neither of them held back. Years later, people would still talk about the hearing at Elk River. Some remembered the legal battle. Others remembered the water rights. Most remembered the kiss. But when neighbors asked how they first came together, Delilah always smiled before answering. He asked me to pretend to be his wife for a year. Then Wade would look at her from across the porch and shake his head, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. And that, he would say, was the best lie I ever told. Beyond them stretched Mercer Creek Ranch, green pastures, flowing water, open skies, and a future neither of them had planned. Yet both had somehow found. As the years passed, the story of Wade and Delilah became something more than a tale people told on front porches or around potbelly stoves during winter. It became a reminder that life rarely arrives the way we expect it to. If you place yourself in Delilah's shoes for a moment, imagine being judged before anyone knew your heart. Imagine carrying your pride through lonely days, only to be offered a chance that felt impossible to trust. Would you have walked away? Or would you have taken that uncertain step forward? And if you stand where Wade once stood, imagine discovering that the person who saved your future was never part of your plans at all. Maybe that's what makes stories like this stay with us. Sometimes love doesn't arrive as a grand promise. Sometimes it begins with mistakes, misunderstandings, and two wounded people trying to protect themselves. Yet when kindness is repeated day after day, when someone chooses to stay through disappointment and doubt, healing quietly finds a way in. Not because life becomes perfect, but because someone finally gives us a reason to believe we don't have to face it alone. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you had been in Delilah's place, would you have forgiven Wade? And if this story stayed with you after the final page, I hope you'll join us again. There are many more journeys waiting ahead. Stories of love, second chances, hidden truths, and people who discover hope in places they never thought to look. Until next time, thank you for spending this part of the trail with us.